Hello and welcome to another edition of Cooper's Corner. Today I'm going to talk about how I teach my reading comprehension at the beginning of grade 6. Specifically, I have to give all my credit to this lady, Miss Adrienne and her Reading Power book. This is the outdated one, now it's blue. This and her writing book are, I would say, the two most influential resources I have. Everything you're seeing today is from Adrienne Gear, okay? So it's just sort of my take on it. So for grade 6, we focus, the decoding is separate, and I'm gonna mention that here in a second, but this is strategies for helping them with their understanding, their reading comprehension. So how do I do it? And I'm gonna have to do this in parts. This is the first part. I'm gonna say how I introduce it, connections, and visualizations. We'll have to talk about the other reading powers later. So introducing, first I have my students understand that when we read, we're actually doing two different things. There's a difference between decoding. Can we look at the words on the page and sound it out? Like, do we know that says reading power, decoding? And then can we understand? Because what I found is that a lot of kids can do one and not necessarily the other. So we want them to recognize both parts are important for reading, but with reading powers, we're focusing on the comprehension, the understanding. I talk about the fact how, I think it was back in the 90s, this gentleman, Mr. David Pearson, kind of a master teacher, asked himself, why is it that some kids are good readers and others aren't? So he went and did all this research and figured out the things that good readers are doing, which we see here, all these different things, connections, etc. This is quite a big list. So then our lovely lady, Miss Adrienne Gear, who you kind of see here in the picture, she narrowed it down into these 5 different reading powers: connecting, questioning, visualizing, inferring, and transforming. So she is getting us, these are strategies that if the kids are consciously doing them, it should improve their overall understanding and retention of the reading. It's fun to do them with them, and it does seem to work. Metacognition, thinking about the thinking, telling the kids that reading isn't just reading the words off the page, but it involves them thinking about it in order to be reading successfully. A couple things she suggests we do. I have the kids start by drawing an apple on a piece of scrap paper. Look around, yeah, most people's apples look pretty similar. Okay, now draw thinking. Kids are like, what? And then we talk about the fact, a lot of kids will draw like thought bubbles, and it's like, no, thinking doesn't happen up here, it happens in your brain. But it's hard for a teacher to teach because you can't see what's happening in my brain. So the reading powers are allowing us to make visible what is currently invisible in my head. So these strategies, connections, I'm going to tell you what my brain is doing. Visualizing, we're going to share what's happening there. These are the things I'm doing, the strategies I'm using to be a successful reader. Some cute little pictures. What does thinking look like? A cute story that's fun to read sometimes. You can find it on YouTube. Sarah Bella's Thinking Cap, Society of Lost Thinking. So then we go on to our first reading power, which is the power to connect. I have them sort of connect their hands. Notice, okay, everyone connect your hands. Oh yeah, looks like you all did it differently. Why? You're different people. The link here is knowing that even though you've read the same books, your connections will likely be different. We're going to focus a bit on that. The words on the page are only half the story, so this sort of mentioned that again. I have created these cue cards, and this is Lori Villeneuve. She had these on her wall when I went into her class as a student teacher like 13 years ago. Love her to pieces. And I've copied, you can see the back of the room, Mr. Lauser, my brain. It's a bit covered up by some non-fiction text features, but I have these cue cards on the back of the wall with the brain. The fact pocket and other pockets are also things that Adrienne Gear has talked about. This gives you a bit of an idea. So I like these cue cards, and I have them stuck up here and also here, because it gives the kids the language and which sort of forces them to make a meaningful connection. So they say, the part when, reminds me of, this helps me understand. This is the part kids sometimes miss, so I focus on the most. We've been reading Harry Potter, so I make an immediate connection to Harry Potter. The part when the Dursleys realize that Dudley's going to have a tantrum, or Harry does, reminds me of when my cousin has a tantrum. She gets all red in the face and her eyes start to crunch up. This helps me understand how Harry was feeling. This worried panic that this kid is going to start freaking out. I'm connecting my feelings with his. I'm naming the emotion. We talk about where our connections come from, usually from our memory pockets, nonfiction, maybe from our fact pocket. Specifically, a few things to remember, and I use these examples. First of all, our connections are not literal. We talk about a class where Adrienne Gear said she went in, little kids, they're reading Franklin the Turtle, and this one kid's crying because she can't make a connection. And Adrienne says, she goes over to her, she's like, what's wrong? And the little kid's like, I can't make a connection because I'm not a turtle. And she's like, no, okay, they're not literal. Franklin was going to school. It was his first day. That's where we're making the connection. Kids usually giggle when I say this. Are everyone's connections going to be the same? No, they're not. Why? Because we've all had different memories, different life experiences. We have different brains. Not all connections are created equal. They have to help deepen your understanding. Adrienne tells another great story about when she was actually doing like a lesson for other teachers, and she's demonstrating with these kids in the class, and she's reading this book about kids getting sort of bullied or something in the cafeteria, and they're reading it. Kid shows his hand up, says, I have a connection, and so she's like, oh yeah, and the kid's like, I connect with the kid's hamburger they're eating for lunch. And he's like, I ate a hamburger for dinner yesterday. And then other kids' hands start going up, and they're like, oh yeah, I love McDonald's, I like hamburgers for lunch. And she's like, oh no, this is going way off track. So then she came up with this idea of putting on your bib. Bring it back to the book. How has this connection helped you understand the story? And that's why I always make them say this. How did you feel in that moment? So how do you think the character is feeling in that moment? Let's see if there's anything else there. This is a nice little slide just to kind of get going. We have some examples. This is like about the wind scale. And like this kid here, Ruby, says she connects with number 4. That reminds me of when Liam was running home and it was so windy, he dropped his homework and it blew all over the place. I tried to help him catch them. I have the kids, is this an effective connection or non-effective? Yes, this one, it makes sense. They experienced the wind blowing the papers. That's what's happening here. Whereas this kid says, yeah, I connect to number 3 because the picture reminds me of an ambulance. No, that's not helping build your understanding of the wind scale. The connection should help you understand what you're reading. From there, I believe we go on, oh, that's a cute one, Rondo in C. It's a hard to find book, but basically it's a book, Rondo in C. And you can listen to it. It's about a score of music. It's this kid playing the piano, and then you see all the people in the living room are sitting there, and you see what they're thinking of while they're listening to the music. And they're all thinking about different things. How is it? Why is it that they're thinking different things even though they're listening to the same piece of music? Well, it's because they all have had different experiences, different brains. Telling the kids again, even though they'll hear the same story, their connections will all be different. From there, I believe I jump into my practice. Yes. So now it's a matter of which books you want to practice with. My absolute favorite is Some Things Are Scary. You'll notice I've gone ahead and like bunny-eared 5. I think I liked the way I did this year the best. I said to the kids, you're gonna have connections. That's awesome. I want you to remember, oh, actually, you know what I did this year? I gave them all a bright piece of colored paper. And I said, if you have a connection, and like hole punch to go in their binder, jot it down on this bright paper. Don't write the whole thing like this, just a couple words to jog your memory. So for example, on this page here, stepping on something squishy when you're in bare feet is scary. So I said to the kids, the part when the character in Some Things Are Scary steps on something squishy in his bare feet reminds me of when I stepped on dog poop in my backyard in my bare feet. This helps me understand how disgusted the kid felt, how shocked, that feeling of their tummy just going, ugh. So that was my connection. On my bright sheet of paper, I just jotted down squishy bare feet. And I remembered that connection. So I read this one and I have the kids make connections on their sheet. After they're done, I let them share with a partner. And then it takes a while, but I let every kid raise their hand who wants to, and we listen to one connection from each kid in the room. Then another fantastic one is No David. Basically, if you've read this before, it's just David doing naughty things. The kids connect to it. Same thing. I share about 4 of my own connections. They jot down on the paper, so they remember, and then I have them share with a partner, and then I listen to them share out. Then I don't think I listened to their connections or might have shared one of my own, I'm not sure, but we also read My Best Friend Sometimes. And finally, my kind of pièce de résistance, Sometimes You Barf. Every kid has a barfing story. So at this point, you've probably orally heard a lot of their connections, but as teachers, we like to have something concrete to prove it. So they've written down their ideas, jotted them down on this bright sheet, and then I just made this up. If you wouldn't mind coming a little closer, Mr. Lauser. I should mention, we as a class created this rubric when we first started discussing connections. We talked about what a proficient connection would look like. It includes all 3 parts. You named the emotion. You said what it helped you understand, and then developing, emerging, extending. And then the structure of the page is exactly like the prompt I've been giving them. The part when reminds me of, this helps me understand. This is the one part I have them now look back at that bright sheet. I say, choose one connection that you think was really good. Write that on there, self-assess, hand it in. Boom, I can say this kid knows how to do connections. I clearly have not got enough time this round for visualizing, so we will continue with that next week. Thank you very much.